I'm with the British Red Cross MAPS team. Everyone in a Red Cross t-shirt, that's us. Feel free to ask us lots of questions. This is a humanitarian OpenStreetMap team Mapathon. So hopefully most of you know what that is. I know some of you don't because it's relatively new, but welcome. We are here to map parts of the world that haven't been mapped and where places where people like MSF and Red Cross work. And this is what OpenStreetMap does. This is what humanitarian OpenStreetMap team people do. That's the kind of data we engage with at the office on a day-to-day basis. So welcome. You're in the right place. So British Red Cross is here. MSF is here with their black t-shirts on over there. And OpenStreetMap is here with their humanitarian OpenStreetMap team here waving. So if you're particularly interested in any one of those angles, feel free to come and chat to us. And yeah, we all have different bits of the pie, and this is the bit of the pie that overlaps in a very, very useful way for all of us. Fire exits. Through that door, through the entrance. Nice and simple. A big thank you to Skills Matter for hosting us for the venue, free of charge, which is brilliant. And a big thank you to Ivan for the pizza, which might appear a bit later on. So thank you, Ivan. So that's courtesy of MSF. Yeah, that's about it. So very quickly, British Red Cross, OpenStreetMap, HOT team, our GIS team, our MAPS team. This is what we do on a daily basis. So we use what you guys are editing now, we stick that onto maps and send it to people in the field. Whether that's to make staffing decisions, or where are we going to work, or where do we put the tent, or all that stuff. Like, this is actually the data set that is used. The other data sets we have no influence over, and we have to buy, and it doesn't make sense, and they don't have the data. So our job in this process is to make sure there's satellite imagery, get it to events like this so that things can be traced. In this case, we're basically dealing with Ebola and Monrovia and doing buildings there. Yeah, and so we're dealing with this on a daily basis. So if you want the office or the remote experience, that's what our guys do. Some of our team have been to the field in the Philippines. Again, it's all about OpenStreetMap and all about the data that comes out of what the volunteers like you guys do. I'm now going to hand over to Ivan, who's going to tell you about the field experience of how this makes a difference in the field.
Do I get to wear that? Cool.
All right then. Okay, welcome. So first of all, a huge thank you to everyone. And since a lot of you have actually heard me ramble on before, I'm going to switch it up a little bit, and I'm actually going to talk rather than, bottom line, as Andrew said, we need this data to be able to make informed resource allocation decisions. Where do we put the scarce resources we have to save the most lives? And I've talked about that enough times that if anybody hasn't heard it, I'm sure somebody else could tell you that old story. What I'm going to tell you about is the crisis that we're dealing with right now, which is Ebola. So who's heard what's happening with Ebola right now lately? I mean, okay, so everyone in the room. This is actually a little bit off the normal missing maps sort of mandate. Normally the missing maps is intended to be before the disaster. Now we're chasing after disaster just like the usual sort of, oh, let's try to mop up. Nevertheless, this one is so big that we have actually asked, begging your forgiveness, that we're going to deploy the missing maps capacity to support the teams in Ebola because they are in desperate straits. Now, to be clear, what we're doing here is trimming weeds in the foothills. The problem is a mountain. And that's what I wanted to just sort of impress upon people right now. The Ebola crisis worldwide, well, in West Africa, is completely out of control. It is one of the most serious crises that MSF has ever faced. It's one of the most serious public health crises since like the 1914 Spanish flu. Every case of Ebola right now is infecting 1.7 more cases. Anybody who knows their math, you work out the doubling period and you see exactly what's going to happen. So doubling periods which go like 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, yeah, that whole thing. Where after 10 doubling periods you're 1,000 times more. This is why there are sort of horrifying predictions coming from, I mean, fortunately, people like like Obama, the President of the United States, because they actually are beginning slowly to wake up to the fact that this is actually a terrifying crisis. Ebola is on its way to becoming endemic in West Africa. So, what's needed? Level 4 isolation trained nurses. Right now in Monrovia, we have something like 200 beds. We estimate that about 1,000 are needed. For the first time in my memory, and for the first time in fact since 1996, in the wake of the Rwanda crisis, MSF has actually asked for the militaries to step in, because there are no other people in the world remaining who have the capacity to manage level 4 isolation facilities, which is what's needed. At this moment, we are turning away people who are dying of Ebola from our centers because we just don't have the staff to treat them. And so we're turning them away to die in the streets or to go home and infect their families. This, for a medical organization, is absolutely ghastly. It is absolutely unacceptable. We have screamed to the world, we need everything, everyone, to do everything possible to control this. It is absolutely staggering public health crisis, and for the people involved, well, we've had some of our staff that we've lost. We've lost 7 staff members who have died of Ebola, and we've actually done some, we do investigations to find out how they got it. Almost all of them did not get it at work. What does that tell you? Okay, our infection control procedures are okay, but it also tells you what's out there. If you work in an Ebola center, but you're more likely to catch it on the bus, what does that tell you about what's happening out in places like Monrovia? So, the teams in Monrovia have asked us, in order to, again, this is trimming weeds in the foothills while the problem is a mountain, but in order to better organize and to better estimate the needs and the population densities and figure out how to organize the response, we have offered to try to digitize every building in Monrovia. It's a huge task. If it's done, it will actually provide significant operational assistance to the teams trying to respond to this crisis. So that's what we're working on today. Next month we'll go back to the normal missing maps where we're looking for places that are sort of uncovered, and there hasn't been a disaster yet. We're trying to make sure that when a disaster happens, we're ready for it, which is really what this is all about. But this time, it's all about Ebola, and it's a pretty serious crisis, so we're really grateful that all of you have turned up to help out with this. So thank you very, very much, and I turn over to the people who will give you more information about how we do it.
That's going to be fun.
Oh, yes. So thank you.
Very good fun. It gets up to the right way, wouldn't it?
So the other thing it's probably worth saying is feel free to keep editing. What Nick's going to do is take you through the very, very basics of OpenStreetMap and how to set yourself up for your first square and your first kind of getting yourself moving. If you're already moving, keep going and listen in and ask the rest of the questions. You can have to get stuck. Tea and coffee in the back, some biscuits, and yeah, bathroom just to enjoy it.
Okay, ladies and gents. Everybody here? Can you hear me back there? I think I'm being ignored. Okay. What we're going to do is to take you through mapping your first square for HOTS. Now, I talk about mapping a square, and that's because if 2 people try and map exactly the same thing, exactly the same road at the same time, the software is going to throw a wobbly and it won't let you upload it. So you'll just be wasting your time. So some clever person has come up with a system, they divided the area up into squares, you each work on your own square, and that way you don't get the conflicts. Now, it's very likely that somewhere in this room we've got a few people that have come along that have done this before, might be a little bit of experts. Could we just have a show of hands, anybody who wants to use JOSM or has used ID a couple of times and is ready to move on to JOSM? Do we have any feeling that way? Okay, right, we stay with ID then. Oh, yes.
Oh, okay, yeah,
Would you rather work with dozen?
No, I'm happy to stay in.
You're happy?
Stay.
Okay, all right. What we're looking at is that with ID, you can map the world, and you can make a very good job of mapping the world. But there are some things which it would be good to, in the fullness of time, move on a little bit. If you start using JOSM, you can do things like validate. Now, I said about mapping your first square, it's not a case of what you stop at, nobody ever looks at. It's a case of you map a square, you mark it as complete, and then a validator checks it. So it's quite important that you understand that nobody is ever 100% happy that they have fully mapped their square. It doesn't work that way. We all have doubts. Any of us that have mapped thousands of squares will tell you that you do as best you possibly can, and then you mark it as complete, and somebody else comes along and they check it and they have a look and see if they think that it needs any more done to it. Right, so are we at the stage where everybody's logged into OpenStreetMap? I've got a few experts in the room. If you're having problems, you stick your hand up and one of the experts will go and join you and sort things out. So everyone's in OpenStreetMap. Okay, just to start you off with, these are a few things which HOT have got involved in the past, where they've produced maps. You can see enormous paper maps have been produced, but if you have a look at the furthest picture, you can see that the guy there is holding some sort of sat-nav, and it's because the information, you're not just looking at a paper map, it can be loaded into whatever thing is needed. And the system is that no matter how much of an expert you think you are able to map. You can do what's necessary, you can trace, you can help to produce a map, and that's what we'll be getting you to do this evening. The nice thing about OpenStreetMap is that there is no copyright on it at all. So all of the guys in the medical services, they can use it without any problems whatsoever. And it's also important, as far as we're concerned, that we involve the local community in the mapping, and they can send people out, they can walk the streets, write down the details of the names of the roads, and that information can be added into the map. So it's important that we make sure that we've got local people involved in the mapping. And in terms of what you're going to be doing, you're going to be finding an area on the map, zooming in to look at it. You might spot a village, then you decide that you can trace it, and you end up with a section of the map that's updated and it's got all the information on it. And there you've got an example of what can be done in a couple of days by a group of people working together. That was the map, that's the map afterwards. So, no pressure, that's what we're expecting of you. Okay, we're going to work on task 662, and we'll just walk you very quickly through this. If I'm going too fast and you've got a problem, stick your hand up. I've got, as I said, a few experts out there that will help you go through. Now I'm hoping that you're at the stage where you've all got an OpenStreetMap account, and you've logged in, authorised it, and you'll have come across this walkthrough. If you haven't done the walkthrough, then just leave that tab and move on with me, and we'll get you to do the walkthrough just afterwards. It'll be a different tab on your web browser. Right, has everybody got the Hot OSM Task Manager loaded as one of the tabs on their web browser? Nobody says no? All looking good so far? Okay, today's task is 662, which is the top of the urgent list. I hope nobody's going to tell me any different. So on the task manager, if you haven't done so already, can you click on the red line which says task 662? And just as a matter of interest, there is a system nowadays where you can get messages through the task manager. So the bit that's on the screen there where it's showing the grey box next to tall guy, that's me by the way, tall guy. That means that I've got a message in there which I could click on. I won't bore you with it because I sent it to myself. Now, when you're looking at the task, you've got a number of tabs. You've got the instructions, contribute, activity and stats. It's important when you're doing these tasks that you actually make sure that you know what it is you've got to do. So do have a read through the instructions and make a mental note of where it is in there. It tells you what to map and the change set comment. Now the change set comment comes into its own when you are saving, and you have to paste it into the little box that appears saying, why are you saving this? The imagery for what you're going to do, this task 662, is both Bing imagery and it's Mapbox, isn't it? Whatever it is, you're going to have to compare the two and see which is best for the square that you're on. Now, if you click on the stats, well, whichever one you like, where you've got that map visible, you've got all squares of different colours. Now, if it's got a gold band on it, somebody somewhere is actually mapping that. They could be anywhere in the world, but they've got it locked. If it's a sort of yellowy colour, then it's done, but it's waiting for a validator to actually check it. And what you're interested in is seeing the square go green. Now there is a way of looking at your own squares once they're completed, and what you would like to see is that square go green, because it says an awful lot. It means you've got it right. They might have done a little bit of work on it, but generally speaking the validators are just going to do a few bits. Everybody misses the odd building. It's just a fact of life. There are occasions when anyone, and that could include me, maps a square and for some reason misses something significant. And I'm talking about an entire village, an awful lot of buildings, a road network. It happens. Sometimes the imagery doesn't load properly, sometimes the phone rings and you miss it. And you think, I finished it, and you click on finish. Then the validator will check on it. And if they think there's too much work for them to do, they can click on a button that says invalidate, and then somebody else can then just finish that square off. They see what the comments are. So it's not a case of somebody lines you up against the wall and shoots you. It's purely a case of you've marked it up, you think it's complete for one reason or another. If they don't agree, they can invalidate it, or they can just correct any of the bits that need doing. Right, now what I'm going to get you to do is on that task 662, if you haven't already done so, I want you to find a square which is not mapped and just click on it. You might have to roll the mouse key to zoom in, the map will then zoom. And once you've clicked on it, the left side of the web browser will show if any of you are using Internet Explorer, you might have a problem. If you can use Google Chrome or Firefox or something like that, if you can't and you are stuck with Internet Explorer, you might find that you are going to be editing with a thing called Potlash, which does the same thing but very, very slightly differently. Okay, everybody clicks on a square. Has anybody not reached the stage where they've clicked on a square? Okay, so hopefully you read through the instructions, and the instructions said you're going to be tracing all of the roads, all of the buildings, all of the features. You've now clicked on a square, and the next stage is to actually start your mapping. Now, when you click on start contributing, or whatever the words are on that green button, you'll get a drop-down list, and it's edit with. If you click on that drop-down list, still dropping out the Wi-Fi. Okay, so if you click on where it says ID Editor, and take a note of the fact of what the time is, because the time is going to fly. It's now just gone 6:30. In 2 hours, the square that you've clicked on and said, I will map, will stop being locked to you and it will become free. And then somebody else could start mapping it, and then all of a sudden you'll be getting conflicts and you're wondering, if that's my square, why am I getting them? It's because you've got 2 hours. Okay, when you first click on the ID editor, it will load up in a different tab on the web browser. It is possible it loads up with a different window, but it's more likely it will be a different tab. And your screen should look a little bit like the slide that's up on your screen. You've got some existing features from OpenStreetMap, a background, and you've got a mode square, which is the limits of your square. None of the buttons are going to be live on the ID editor until you zoom in. And roughly speaking, the scale will read about 250 metres when they become live. But in terms of editing, you actually want the scale to be round about the 20 metre mark, so you need to zoom in quite a long way. Before you actually zoom in, if you click over on the right hand side of the square with the layers button, if you make sure that in that layers button you've got a tick in the box that says GPS traces, and you need to make sure what imagery you've got loaded. Now this particular task, it speaks about bin imagery and mapbox imagery. Right, let me know this right. Okay, it very probably will have loaded up using bin imagery. Is anybody unable to see the streets and the buildings, or can you see them with bin imagery? All looking good, okay. Right. Zoom in until the scale is reached about 20 metres and make sure that you stay within your box. You should find that there are some things which are already within that square which have been mapped by somebody else. And if you click on them, you'll get, in my case I've clicked on a building, and you'll get something like I've got on the screen here. You need to just check what the tags are that are on these existing features. You might well find that somebody else has mapped it, but they're not sure if they've got it right. And you need to just check what tags they've actually put on the thing. So just click on it. In my case, a building, and you want to go across to the section which says all tags and just see what the tags are that have already been applied to it. get you to have a look at the screen for a moment or two, please? We've got on the screen a typical West African village. And I'll show you how you want to end up with it being there. On the outskirts of a lot of the villages, there will be a school. And you can identify them normally by one or two long buildings and a couple of small square buildings which are toilet blocks. And the whole area needs to be tagged as community school. Now, most of these settlements are going to have buildings in them which are squarish. If you've got square buildings, the chances are pretty good that they've used a motor vehicle to get the materials in there. So you're going to be looking at the roads which connect the buildings together are going to either be residential, unclassified, or even large in size. But you're also going to have quite a few smaller roads or tracks which just go off into the countryside, and those you end up as tagged as tracks. And you're going to need to have a boundary around all of the buildings, which if you think they're residential, marks up as that is residential. So in Joslin, not many of you looking at Joslin, but that's the way the screen will look. Or in ID, that's the sort of thing that you're looking at. Now, one of the problems that you'll face when you're mapping with ID is that it's very easy to trace a road but not actually connect it to the existing roads. You need to make sure that they are actually connected. They share a common node. In other words, this area here, we've got a dot to show that the two are connected together. What you mustn't have is it just goes over the top without connecting. If you think about your car GPS, it routes you because it knows the roads connect together. So you've actually got to connect the roads together, otherwise it's not going to happen. Okay, I think most people have already started tracing things. Scale about 20 metres, find a road and trace it. Sound okay? Now, I've spoken to you about saving and the change set comment. What I would say to you is save often, upload very, very often. Do not trace 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 buildings and then save and find that it won't let you. Trace something, tag it, upload it. Keep doing that as quickly as you can, especially if whatever it is that you're working on goes outside of your square. So if you're talking about a road which goes across several squares, as soon as you make a small change to it, save it, because otherwise you're going to get conflicts and it won't let you carry on. Everybody happy that they know how to save? Yes. Okay. Again, just something to bear in mind. You're looking at a rural community. You could well have shepherds' huts. You could well have huts out in the rural area which are just used for storing tools, etc. You do not put a line around that saying that it's a residential area. You have a look at it and you try and make a judgment call. If you're talking about lots more huts or lots more buildings, then yes, it's residential. But if you're talking about 2 or 3 buildings, it probably isn't. All of the roads, if possible, put a tag on them saying what the surface of the road is. Now, there are not many roads out there which are surface of asphalt. Most of them, you're going to put on them surface equals unpaved. Don't get too technical, you can have surface equals dirt, but I'm happy with just surface equals unpaved. Just because it's not paved doesn't mean it's a track. It could still be a residential road, it could still be a main road, but it's just got a gradient surface, it's called. Right, now the next bit, one of the most important bits for you to understand from the evening. You do your best, you map as much as you possibly can within the square, but you've got to be a bit bold. You've got to say, I think it's complete, and mark it as complete. Otherwise the entire room is going to spend all evening looking at each other's squares. You look at it, you think it's complete, mark it as complete, move on to another square. And a validator will check it out. If they disagree, they're going to mark it up. They may well send you a message. They might just send you a message saying, that was brilliant, well done, keep it up. They might also send you a slightly different message. Okay, I think we've worked our way through this. I'm going to take the headset off and just wander around. If anyone's got any questions, let us know. Otherwise, we just carry on mapping. And see if we can get that 662 all complete this evening.
Is that all for your presentation now? No, basically you should be going. I know, not on that day. Yeah, it's green. Yeah, maybe.
You can sit.